Good morning. This is Dr. Mike, and I wanted to share with you in our final week some of my thoughts on the Crusades, which are a major undertaking in Christian history and what was going on in Western history, of course, around the year 1000 to about 1200. First of all, we have talked in previous lectures about the division of the Roman Empire, and this is an ongoing issue during this period. This is where the term Byzantine really takes hold. I really don't think of the term used much in relation to Constantine, other than the fact that Constantine did divide the empire to make it much more manageable, and they could rule over it because it stretched in such vast proportions from east to west that became a problem as far as trying to manage and to protect the assets of the empire and the peoples of the empire. And part of the purpose of the Roman army was to protect Roman citizens and make it possible for them to travel and do the things that they needed to do. We have talked about the relationship between the Romans and Roman roads and Roman protection and its importance to the sharing of the gospel in the early church. Early church, you're talking about the years 100, 200, 300 before the Christianity is named as the official religion of the Roman Empire. That occurs about 391 under Theodosius. But you've got to realize that Paul and his partners were traveling in less than 170 AD or thereabouts. So basically, at that point in time, Rome was much more settled and much more safe for travel. It will grow increasingly precarious after 300, well up until later years when Rome is not nearly as strong as it was, and of course Rome falls in 476, and after that on the Western Front for the part of history that belongs to us here in America, it was a precarious situation. People no longer could live in cities because it was unsafe. Cities were where the wealth was concentrated, and so the Huns and the Vandals, and later after 700, the Muslims are going to attack cities, much like we know the Vikings did, and pillage and steal, and so it becomes very unsafe to live in cities, and so people go back to living on manors, farms, basically, and you go back to a farm economy. You really don't have cities that amount to much as far as other than just maybe major churches there, cathedrals, but most people are living on manors. Realizing that that's the case, it's not safe to travel. And so you have a lot of people during that feudal age, if you remember that from history, the age of knights and fiefs and manors. Uh, each of those communities were self-contained. They had a priest and a church there to take care of spiritual needs. They had the lord of the manor to tell them what to do, and basically most people just worked and were freehand labor. They never left the manor because there was no reason to. Everything was self-contained, food and everything was there, and there wasn't probably enough wealth there for someone to want to rob and steal, and so as a result, they were kind of left alone. That's like 700, 800, 900, the 1000s. Rome had divided, as we said, between the Byzantines in the east and the old Roman Empire in the west. And in 1054, there is another major division that we don't talk a great deal about in this course. It was called the Great Schism because the church, the Roman Catholic Church, divides between east and west just like the empire did. In the west, the language was Latin. The head was the Pope, and he was the spiritual head. There's no longer a Latin ruler. That kind of disappears after 500 and 600. In the East, the language is Greek, and they're much more Greek oriented. They have a religious leader there, and they also have a ruler, like Constantine was a ruler in the West and the East. And so basically, the seat of authority is going to shift from Rome to Constantinople. So what's left of Roman Empire is going to shift in that direction. What is left theologically of of Christianity after the fall of Rome is going to shift to Northern Africa. And so you're going to see Northern Africa play a major role in church history for several centuries after that. But by and large, people within 200 years have lost their ability to read. They're no longer literate. Even priests aren't reading. And so when Charlemagne comes to the throne in 800 and he is crowned the Holy Roman Emperor, it is because he's using his armies to try to pull things back together. And he institutes the Carolingian revival, which begins to force people, especially priests, to be able to read the Bible for the congregation. And so this revival, he starts a school training people to read at the center of his kingdom. With the division of the church into east and west, the Pope of the Byzantine Church calls for the Pope at Rome to send them armies to help defeat the encroaching Muslims. And of course, we know Genghis Khan and the people coming out of Asia are encroaching more and more upon the Eastern Kingdom. And so the Pope gives this call to go on this holy war, this pilgrimage, to save Jerusalem from the infidels. Now, notice how I said that, because every war that we ever fight, we always have to sell it to the rank and file. Had you asked for people to go and fight for this religious system in Constantinople, probably very few people would have gone. But when you crouch it in terms of let's go and save Jerusalem, the Holy Land, the land where Jesus walked, let's save it from these infidels. The terms are interesting because they will be terms that Muslim fundamentalists in our day will use, like jihad, holy war, infidels. And of course, the infidels to the Christians in 1000 were the Muslims. The infidels to the Muslims today are the Western Christians. So those terms have kind of juxtaposed themselves into a different light. But at any rate, the Pope also says to any man who has blood on his hands, who has killed people, who needs forgiveness, I will grant you a forgiveness for your sins. I'll give you a get out of jail free card, if you will, for any of your sins. So there's a lot of kings and rulers. I mean, Richard the Lionhearted the German ruler, one of them was killed and drowned in a river while he's on this crusade. So there were 5 crusades overall. And I won't take the time to discuss each of them because they are each a study in themselves. So some of them really quite perverted. There was a children's crusade where this nutty priest had a dream in which God said, if you'll raise children up and take them on a children's crusade, I will give Jerusalem into their hands. As it turned out, they started with 5,000 children. Those children get kidnapped and sold into slavery, and nobody ever hears from them again. So could you imagine being a parent and you send your child on this pilgrimage and then you never hear from them? They never come back. I mean, there's no communication. So basically, that is a problem. The First Crusade was successful in retaking the Holy Land from the Seljuk Turks and the Ottomans and all these different groups that were there. And so for a number of years, the pilgrims will hold. If you're thinking now, this is just a bunch of rabble. There's not a standing army. You know, they might have a rake or a hoe as a weapon. That was it. But they managed to take over. You know, remember, technology is not really near where it is today, and we had lost in the West a great deal of technology, no doubt, from the Romans, who were a technological people. But it only takes 100 years for that to die and to disappear. The major technologies coming out of the year 1000, 1100 was the horse collar and the stirrup. And the stirrups made horses a piece of technology that could be used in battle. And of course, we know Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great already, and the Romans had already utilized horses, but not nearly to the effect they would in the future after the invention of the stirrup. The other interesting thing in Europe is the horse collar. Most plowing was done before 1100, say, with oxen. yokes of oxen. Oxen were not the easiest animals to turn. It took 40 acres to turn them around at the end of a row. And so as a result, lots of fields were too small to be uh, available for farming. When horses and the horse collar was developed, you can turn a horse on a much smaller radius. And as a result, it opened land for food production in Europe that's going to get them out of the starvation that they have been in for a number of years. So that's a very important piece of technology for this. So basically, the Crusades will go on, and basically they are counterproductive to what the Pope of the Byzantine Church had wanted. Because once they got there, they realized these hordes of people came without provisions. There's no way to provide food for an army like that, or places to sleep. They slept out under the stars, and they ate off of the land, which destroyed the livelihoods of the people that had asked them to come. So wasn't the most ideal thing, um, that happened to them. But at any rate, these crusades basically by 1200, Saladin had retaken the Holy Land and closed the door. Now, some great things happened in the Crusades that would have far-reaching effect. Many bad things happened because these good Christians who were going to take the Holy Land back end up raping and pillaging and stealing, and like a band of locusts moving across the countryside, eating everything in sight, taking everything they wanted. They destroyed the economies of the local peoples, and those were all bad things, and many other things happened. The good thing was that while they are in the Holy Land, that they are introduced to things that they've never had before. Remember, these Europeans in 1100 have never traveled anywhere. They've never been anywhere outside their farms, and they didn't have access to lots of things. You and I tend to judge the past through our own lens and think, all things are as they've always been, and you have all these great things, you have a Walmart on every corner, and you have a CVS, and you have a Walgreens. That was not the case in 1100. You did not have anything access to much. If you got it, you made it basically, and it was a very primitive tool, like a weapon for the first, or a plow. First time they have an iron plow in Europe, they're able to break up ground they've never been able to plow before. It greatly changes their life, but it's still a very primitive implement. But they come in contact with things like coffee. Coffee was a Muslim drink. It was called the drink of infidels. And actually, the Pope puts a blessing on coffee in 1100 so good Christians could drink it. So when you're drinking your coffee, realize it's had this blessing on it. I jokingly say, and I think I've maybe sent you that note before, that Starbucks was saved the world basically. All over the Arab world, coffee was this huge drink, and they had coffee houses. They had Starbucks long before the Crusades or Starbucks-like organizations. I was in Amman, Jordan once with a tour group, and we were just really dying for a cup of coffee one evening, and dessert or whatever. We're out walking on the streets of Amman, Jordan, and we decided we're going to get coffee. We go back to the hotel. They serve coffee in these little small Dimitev cups that are, it's like paste. It's like eating paste. And I kid you not that I was awake for 3 days. The caffeine was so strong in that. That would have been a Arab Syrian kind of coffee. At any rate, the Crusaders bring that back with them to Europe. And so there is a demand for coffee. The other thing they don't have before is sugar. It's hard to realize that in 1100 people didn't have sugar. They used honey and probably various other things to sweeten whatever they were making. But coffee, sugar, and spices are become a big item of trade between now the Holy Land and Europe. In 1200, when Saladin closes the door to the Holy Land and says, "No more coffee for you," and becomes the coffee Nazi, and I say that facetiously, of course. Then Europe, in order to fill the demand, had to start these overland trade routes to Constantinople and get it there. This is how Marco Polo in the late 1100s not only went to Constantinople, but he went on all the way to China. And for the first time, Europeans are in China. Look at the grandeur of that civilization that they really knew nothing about. But China is much, much older than the West and much, much more advanced and different kind of religion and different kind of philosophies all about. So basically, he's going to bring back these wondrous tales from China. But so basically, that overland route, which is more dangerous and more expensive, and all the other things that are involved, will continue until 1453, when the Muslims overrun and take Constantinople finally, and shut that door. And my point is, we're 40 years from Columbus. And remember, Columbus is trying to sail to the east by going west and reaching the land where spices and coffee and sugar are plentiful to be able to start a trade relationship. And of course, he bumps into this little place called North America that they had no idea was there. And so, the rest is history, as we say. So coffee had a very unusual influence on the age of exploration, as did these spices and other things. And so, as you study and read about the Crusades, realize that the religion, you can't read religious things through our glasses today, because the Protestant Reformation, for many of us, has changed how we look at religion. And it is very much the Catholic Church from about 500 on until 1500. All Bibles and everything are hand copied up until 1500. So it's a very different world. And we're so easy to say, oh, if they got the Christian label on it, then it is our kind of Christianity, or what we understand to be Christianity. But it was much more Catholic Christianity than Protestant. And so you have to keep that mind when you see Christianity. Look at the lens. That's why history is so important. You don't get the historical lens unless you put on the historical glasses. And so I think you will find that to be quite interesting. I hope this has been of some benefit to you, and I look forward to further discussion on these points. Thank you.